I love God's word, and there are a lot of little stories in the Bible that just constantly speaks to me. But this one little story is just a constant reminder to me, and I think hopefully for all of us about what does it really mean to share our faith. So before we get started, Joe, would you use a prayer?
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this group of men that we have in this room tonight. Lord, we come to you and we just ask for understanding and help us learn your word and help us pass along that knowledge and teach you your word, God. And we just thank you and we love you and praise you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. So you've got your Bibles. Open up to John chapter 9. Start off with verse 1. And I'm going to read, so you can follow. I want to read through this slowly and just kind of look at some of this stuff real quick. This is a story about a blind man. He's been blind since birth. And, synopsis real quick, God's going to heal him. But it's not just the healing that takes place. It's how he responds to that healing. And I think that's the important piece in this tonight is how do we really respond? This week or this past several weeks at work, and Don knows a little bit about this, but at Duke Power, they've been going through some major reductions, and within nuclear, within IT, and I've been with Duke for over 38 years, so I've seen this quite a few times. More than I ever want to keep up with. But I don't know about you, but I look at my job as a mission field. I really do. I mean, I firmly believe, guys, that first of all, we have to make sure ourselves are right with God, number one. Two, we ought to be sharing with our wives and hearing what God's doing in her life and sharing what God's doing in our lives. I think that's a constant commitment. Then, if for all of us, I don't know who all has children, who doesn't have children here. But the next thing, I think our children need to know what God's doing in our lives. But then once we get it past the house, I see it as a wide open mission field. And the thing is, if you're not doing this at home, it's going to be awfully hard to do it anywhere else. But, a lot of people think, they'll go up and say, I just don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. And that's why I want to read this story, because a lot of times it's not, you don't have to be an educated, go to seminary, study, take a bunch of classes in school, and it just, what is God doing in your life? And how do you go about sharing that? So let's look at this. They were passing by, Jesus and his disciples, and he saw a blind man from birth. And his disciples asked him, said, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he would be born blind? So there was a constant misconception, first of all, that, hey, if you were born with a handicap, it must have been because either you sinned or you got a handicap. It's either because you've sinned or your parents have sinned, okay? But watch how Jesus responds to this. He says, you really got it all wrong. He says, it was neither, not this man who sinned or his parents, but it was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must do the works of him who sent me as long as day and night is coming so that no one can work. I am in the world. I am the light of the world. So basically, stopping right there. Jesus is saying, look, if you got difficulties, God already knows that. I mean, this guy, God, he was born blind. Wasn't surprised to God. But what Jesus said here, he says, hey, look, he was born blind so that God could work through him. There was a young girl who was born one day
after my daughter was born. The friend of mine was a youth pastor at Westport Baptist Church, and our third child, Catherine, was born. And then it wasn't expected to happen next day, but the very next day, Mike Gooch, the youth pastor at that church, his wife comes in and says, "We're having our baby." So both girls were born side by side. But Bethany, their child, ended up with a really crippling disease. A lot of prayer, asking God, please heal, please heal, please heal. God never healed her from that disease. She survived longer. It was a disease that most kids would not survive past 10 years of age. She survived at 21 years of age. Going to the funeral, countless stories of how God had used Bethany to touch other people's lives. No idea. You know, we look at sufferings and we look at things around us and a person who may have this disability or whatever, and we say, "Oh, that poor folk, that poor person." But God knows what He's doing. And on top of that, He uses things like this to reach out to the rest of the world. Because remember, God's on a mission. And His mission is what? Who thinks what God's mission is?
Save the lost.
Yeah, to redeem the world. And He calls us to join Him. Now, if we fail, does that stop God in His mission? Never yet, never will. God's constantly on a mission. He just calls us. And sometimes what happens is He'll call us, we'll jump in, we'll screw things up, we'll bail out. God continues on. Eventually we go, "Oh, God, I need to get back into it." But God's on a constant mission. And that mission has been going on since the creation of this world. So going back to the story. So then after he said this, he spat on the ground, which seems kind of weird to me. He spat on the ground, made some clay, and applied the clay to his eyes and said, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which is also meant sent. And so the boy went away and washed and came back seeing. And he said there, "God, why in the world did you make clay and stick in his eyes?" I have no idea. There's all kinds, you can read all kinds of little editorials and everything else. Some say, "Oh, because it caused an irritation in his eyes and forced him to run to the pool," which I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, he took saliva one time. Sometimes he just went and said, "You're healed." Have no idea why. The thing is that the key piece in this is that the boy listened. He just said yes. Went to the pool, washed his eyes. Next thing he knows, he was seeing. Now therefore, the neighbors and those who previously saw him as a beggar were saying, "Is this not the one who used to sit and beg?" And others would say, "This is he." Still others would say, "No, but he is like him." But the boy kept saying, "I am the one. I'm seeing, I'm the one. Look!" And so they went and said to him, "How then are your eyes open?" And he answered, he said, "The man who is called Jesus put clay, anointed my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went away, washed, and I received my sight." And they said to him, "Where is he?" He says, "I don't know." And I keep paying attention to how this young man keeps responding, because this is kind of neat. So far, the first thing he did is he responded quickly. But then as soon as he responded, he received a sight and goes, "Hey, look at me! I'm the one." Everyone goes, "Oh, I'm not sure about this." "I'm the one. So they bring him before the Pharisees, and the man who was formerly blind. Now, of course, I think God just does things just to kind of tick off some of the religious people. Because, of course, this was on the Sabbath. What day is the Sabbath in Jewish times?
Saturday.
That's right. So this was on the Sabbath. And they brought him to there, and on the day when Jesus had made the clay and opened his eyes. And then the Pharisees also asked him again, "How did you receive your sight?" He said to him, "Come on in." He said to him, "He applied clay to my eyes, and I washed, and I can see." Has the story changed? No. That's just a simple little story. He applied clay. He told me to go wash. I went and washed. Now I can see. Therefore, some of the Pharisees were saying, "This man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath." But others were saying, how can a man who is a sinner perform such signs? And there was a division amongst the Pharisees. So they said to the blind man again, what do you say about him since he opened your eyes? And he said, he must be a prophet. I don't know. I mean, how many times do you have somebody come around and all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're seeing? So therefore the Pharisees, the Jews then did not believe it of him, and that he was blind and received his sight. So until they had called his parents, of the very one who received his sight, and they questioned him, saying, "Is this your son, who says he was born blind? Then now he sees." And so the parents respond back and they said, "We know this is our son, and that he was born blind. But how he sees, we don't know. Who opened his eyes? We don't know. Ask him. He's of age. He will speak for himself." Now you got to understand this. Parents weren't just being mean to his son, but there was a lot of fear. A lot of fear in how you respond to the Jews. Because again, Jewish, being a Jew and being a Jew, they kind of took care of you. It was kind of like, anybody come from a Catholic church background? In the Catholic Church, excommunication, right? So if you, in the Catholic Church, if you do certain things, and I don't know if they practice it as religiously as they used to, but in the Catholic Church, if you get a divorce or other sins, you're excommunicated from that family. I'm so thankful that hey, God doesn't excommunicate us anywhere. But anyway, they were fear of this, and so they said this. Because they were afraid of what the Jews and being kicked out of the synagogue. So again, they called him and said to the man, "Give glory to God. We know this man's a sinner." Now here he goes. He answers again. He says, "Whether he is a sinner, I don't know. But one thing I do know, I was blind and now I can see." So they said to him, "How did he do this? How did he open your eyes?" And he answered them. He said, "I already told you. Did you not listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you not want to become his disciples too? Do you?" And then they really got mad at him and they said, "Hey, you're his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken through Moses, but for this man we do not know where he comes from." And then the man answered him and said, "Well, here it's an amazing thing, that you do not even know where he is from, yet he opened my eyes." We don't know, we know that God does not hear sinners. But if anyone is God-fearing and does his will, he hears him. And since the beginning of time, it has never been heard of anyone just opening the eyes of a person born blind. If this man is not from God, he could do nothing. Then they answered and said, "You were born entirely in sin, and you're trying to teach us," and they put him out. Now, what was the guy's testimony? Simple, wasn't it? Look, I was blind. I can see. A lot of times we say, "Hey, I want you," and we're going to do this here in a few minutes, but hey, I want you to give a testimony about what God's doing in your life. And we'll go, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. But guys, I challenge you. It's not that I believe that God's doing miraculous miracles in our lives every single day of the life. But I believe there's opportunities that constantly happen in our lives. Like I said, for my job, I didn't know if I was going to make it or not. I think I still have a job. They're starting a whole new reorganization chart and everything else, and I haven't heard any more about layoffs, although last week, there was a number of folks that, there was two options to do. One was to take the package and voluntarily be dismissed, and then if they didn't have the numbers, they would go in and they escorted people off. And in a nuclear site, I guess maybe they do it in some other places, but in a nuclear site, if they ask you to leave that day, you are walked out of the building. Again, because it's a nuclear site, they're protecting the house. But still, so it's not a very, I've seen this, I think you and I were in, was it back in the 90s? And we watched two ladies in our group, I think. And we were just sitting in the office, and it's like these two ladies, they come in, they would say, "We need to talk to you." They walk down, we never saw them again. They didn't get to clean their desk out or anything. And basically, the people came back up and just packed up their stuff and brought it down to them. And so like that. And that's a sad experience. But on the flip side of that, you know, I kept praying, Lord, if it's time, fine. If it's not, fine. And you know, I sit here and I look at it, and as far as I know today, I still have a job. So you know, my prayer this morning when I was praying through all this, my prayer this morning is, hey God, I appreciate the opportunity for more time to be in the mission field at my work, because that's how I really look at it. I look at that neighborhood as a mission field. I look at every opportunity as an opportunity to share. Now, do I have, you know, I mean I'm going to be honest. We're working men. You don't get the opportunity to stand and shoot the breeze all day long and talk about God and everything else. We have to get jobs done. But there's opportunities, I believe, all the time, where somebody might come up and just share something with you and says, hey, and you have an opportunity just to be short. You know, it says this, Paul constantly writes, and there's several verses I want to read to you. In 2 Timothy 4:2, it says, preach the word in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort, be complete and patient in teaching. Just be ready. Be ready. You know, we come every Tuesday here, and I love this group. I really do. But if all we do is just come and listen and study His Word, or even if you're at home and you get up in the mornings or in the evenings and you're studying His Word, but you're never looking for an opportunity to apply it, then what good is all that knowledge? Where does it go? You know, it's like somebody going to school and becoming an engineer or some sort of degree and yet never using it all. It's like, why? Why do it? You know, and if God's really truly alive in your life, there's got to be things that God's showing you each day. There's got to be little nuggets that He's showing you. And it may mean something you're thinking about at the time, but God will open the door and somebody will have, hey, you know, let me tell you about a problem, and all of a sudden you'll realize, hey, I just faced that. Or hey, I faced that in the past. And here's how God helped me through it. Or sometimes we don't have the word at all to say, and sometimes, can I just pray with you? Can I just mourn with you? But we've got an opportunity, because Jesus says the field is wide open. It's harvest time. And folks, I don't know, if you look around this world, you know, skip church one time. Don't tell Jordan I said this. It's not being recorded, right? Skip church one time and just go to Walmart. Go to the grocery store. Just drive them down to Denver during the church hour and see how many people are not in church. You know, I mean, we're fortunate. We have a wonderful church. You know, I mean, I think last Sunday was a small Sunday for whatever reason. But last Sunday, you know, because I get to every 3 months I get to sit in the media, and they do a head count, and in the head count there was over 650 people that attended all 3 services. That's pretty awesome. You know, when I first come and started going to Pursuit, and at that time it was called Harvest Cove, I think there was about maybe 200 that were there, and that's only been about 2.5 years ago. So you think about the growth that God has done with Inside Pursuit, and I'm excited about that. And a lot of that's because people in this group, and probably you also, have invited somebody, hey, come join. You know, let me tell you what's going on in our church. In Colossians it says this. It says, walk in wisdom towards outsiders. Again and again, it's people who don't know who God is. Making the best use of your time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to ought and answer each person. We're going to see this maybe this year, maybe in January, depending on how fast we move through 1 Peter. But in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 14 and 15, it says, do not fear their intimidation. And again, as we've been studying through Peter's writing to Jews, but he's also writing to Jews and Greeks. And during the time that he's writing, these people are being persecuted. And says, so don't fear their persecution, and do not be troubled, but sanctify God as Lord in your heart. Always be ready to make a defense to anyone who speaks and asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, and yet do it with gentleness and reverence. And I like how in Romans, when Paul was writing to a church that he hasn't even been to yet, he longed to see them. And I like how he says this. He writes, he says, I'm really longing to be with you, that we may mutually encourage each other's faith, both yours and mine. So what I want to do is I just want to stop, and I want to open the floor up to let folks just share. Hey, what's